I knocked frantically at the door, panic gripping me like a vice. My hands trembled, and my heart pounded so violently that I could hear it in my ears. The night was silent, yet my breath was loud, ragged gasps escaping me like I had been running for miles. The door creaked open, and my mother appeared, her face wrinkled with worry. But when she saw me standing there, drenched in sweat, her expression shifted from concern to sheer shock. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. "Ghulam Ahmad," she whispered, stepping closer. "What happened? What are you doing here at this hour? Is everything all right?" I couldn't speak. My tongue felt heavy, as though words had abandoned me. My mother's worried eyes scanned my face. The beads of sweat glistened under the dim light from inside the house. My chest rose and fell rapidly, struggling to contain the whirlwind of fear inside me. She stepped aside, allowing me in. I didn't wait for another word. I darted past her, my feet barely touching the floor, and rushed straight to my room. My mother followed, her slippers scuffing against the wooden floor. "What is it?" she pressed. "Why are you so scared? What have you done?" Her words cut through me like a blade. I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of the night's events crushed my soul. My legs gave out, and I collapsed at her feet, burying my face in her lap. "Mom," I sobbed, my body shaking violently. "I didn't want this to happen. I swear I didn't. I don't know what came over me." She placed a trembling hand on my head, but I could feel her hesitation. A mother knows when her child has done something terribly wrong. Her fingers, usually warm and reassuring, were cold. "Forgive me," I pleaded, gasping for breath. "But it wasn't my fault. She came to me. She did." "But—" I stopped. My throat clenched shut. I couldn't say more. I couldn't explain, even if I wanted to. My mother's hands dropped to her sides. She stood up slowly, stepping away from me. "What have you done, Ahmad?" she asked again, her voice almost a whisper now. "You were supposed to be at your aunt's house. What happened there?" I couldn't answer. I just shook my head, unable to meet her eyes. "I need to rest, Mom," I muttered. "Please. I can't talk about it right now." She remained still for a moment, then sighed heavily. "Fine," she said. "We'll talk in the morning." She turned and left, closing the door behind her. I locked the door immediately. My hands still trembled as I leaned against the wall. My head throbbed. The weight of what had happened, what I had done, threatened to suffocate me. Morning arrived with an eerie silence. The world outside felt still, yet the air inside my chest was turbulent. I sat up in bed, staring blankly at the wall. The events of last night played in my mind like a broken reel. And then a thought struck me. My aunt. Any moment now she could call my mother. And if she did, if she told her everything, I clenched my fists. She wouldn't believe me. My mother wouldn't believe a single word I said, because I was a man, and men were always guilty in situations like these. She would think I was just like the rest, that it was in my nature. All my kindness, my good deeds, my clean conscience, none of it would matter. Everything would be erased in a moment, swallowed by a single accusation. And then, a sound, a shrill, piercing noise cut through the silence. A siren. My breath hitched. A police siren. My body froze, every muscle locking in place. My ears rang as the wailing siren grew louder, closer. My stomach twisted. No, 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 not this. I staggered to my feet, my heartbeat deafening now. Then a knock, loud, forceful, at the door. I gasped, backing away from my bedroom door, as if whoever was outside could see me through it. No, this couldn't be happening. I rushed to the window, peering out cautiously. A police car, parked outside our house. My knees nearly gave out. My mother was already heading toward the door. "Mom, don't!" I cried, running after her. She turned, startled. "What's wrong with you?" she demanded. "Why are you acting like this?" I could barely speak. My hands shook uncontrollably. "Mom," I whispered hoarsely, my voice barely escaping my throat. Don't open the door. Please don't let them in. The knocking grew more urgent. What is happening? She asked, her face pale now. Why are you sweating so much? Who are they? Tears burned in my eyes. It's the police, I choked out. They're here for me. My aunt, she sent them. Mom, you have to save me. I swear I didn't do anything. It was Erum's fault. The knocking turned into pounding. A mother's love is strong. It shields. It protects. But even she hesitated now. Ahmad, she said cautiously, what are you saying? What have you done? I shook my head frantically. Nothing, I cried. I did nothing. Then why is the police here? I couldn't answer. Another bang at the door. I need to see who it is, she said, moving past me. No! I grabbed her wrist. Please don't! But she pulled away. My mother was many things, caring, patient, understanding. But she was also a woman who needed answers, and she would get them. I couldn't stop her. I stumbled back as she reached for the door handle, and then she opened it. I couldn't watch. I turned and bolted back to my room, slamming the door behind me, locking it. My breath came in gasps. I pressed my back against the cold wooden door, my legs weak, my body drenched in sweat. Outside, I could hear voices. Deep, stern, the police. I strained to listen, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Then, a knock, on my door. My heart stopped, my mother's voice. Ahmad, she said softly, come out. No, 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 no. The police want to speak with you. A shiver ran down my spine. This was it, the moment I had feared the most. I thought maybe I could escape it. Maybe somehow I could fix this before it reached this point. But it was too late now. There was no escape, no second chances, no salvation. Everything was about to come crashing down, and my life would never be the same again. I was lost in my own thoughts when my mother's voice pulled me back to reality. Open the door, she called out. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and slowly opened the door. Standing before me were two police officers. My heart nearly stopped. My face turned pale as I glanced at my mother, searching for answers. She seemed calm, but her voice was firm as she spoke. They're asking about a neighbor, she explained. I don't know who they're looking for, but maybe you do. If you do, just tell them. The breath I had been holding finally released, and I took a deep sigh of relief. My panic began to fade, and I tried to regain my composure. After a few moments, I turned to the officers. Who are you looking for? I asked hesitantly. They provided a name and an address. I quickly gave them directions and watched as they left. The moment the door shut behind them, I turned to my mother. Mom, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I want to tell you something. A truth that I don't know if you will believe or not. She frowned, concern growing in her eyes. What is it? I've been watching you since last night. You've been acting strange. A heavy weight settled on my chest. I knew there was a chance she wouldn't believe me, but I had to say it. I had to tell someone before this guilt consumed me. Mom, Erum tried to trap me in front of my aunt, I admitted, my voice trembling. She narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? She's young, beautiful. I lost control. I didn't realize what I was doing. And then, I hesitated, unable to finish my sentence. It was Sunday morning. My mother had been trying to wake me up for hours. College was out for the holidays, and every year during this time, I would visit my aunt's house. Ghulam Ahmad, wake up! It's morning already. If you leave early, you'll reach your aunt's house by nightfall, my mother urged. Mom, let me sleep. Even if I leave in the afternoon, I'll still reach there in time, I mumbled, turning over in bed. Just go now, son. It will ease my worries. Besides, this time you're traveling alone, she said. Mom, you're acting like I'm a little kid who'll get lost on the way, I said, teasing her. She smiled, running her fingers through my hair before kissing my forehead. To me, you'll always be my little Ahmad. Your aunt and I used to carry you around everywhere. I opened my eyes slightly, watching her with a mix of fondness and frustration. With a sigh, I sat up. I loved my aunt dearly. She was my only maternal aunt, and I had a deep bond with her. Since she didn't have a son, she showered me with all the love in the world. She had only one daughter. My aunt lived far away, which is why we could only visit her once a year. I got ready and left as soon as possible, catching the first bus to my aunt's city. However, for some strange reason, an unsettling feeling gripped me. My heart felt uneasy, as if something was about to go terribly wrong. Then in the distance, I heard the call to prayer. It calmed me, and I took the opportunity to stop and offer my prayers during the journey. Prayer and the Quran were a significant part of my life, a source of peace. After praying, I felt a bit better and dozed off in the bus. The next time I opened my eyes, I had already arrived at my aunt's city. My arrival at her house was met with warmth and love. They welcomed me happily, and after a long, tiring journey, I went to bed early that night. I was in deep sleep when I felt someone enter my room. I was too exhausted to care, dismissing it as a dream, or perhaps my aunt checking in on me. I ignored it and drifted back into sleep. The next morning was lively. The house was filled with laughter and warmth. After having breakfast, made lovingly by my aunt, I went to relax in the courtyard. That's when she arrived. Erum. She walked toward me and I was stunned. In just 1 year, she had changed completely. She had grown into a young woman, her presence commanding attention. I found myself staring at her, unable to look away. She sat beside me, smiling. "You only visit once a year. Doesn't your heart ever miss us?" The innocence in her voice made my heart pound in a way I wasn't ready for. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Erum, how old are you now?" She looked at me surprised. "That's a strange question to ask at this moment," she said with a smirk. "I'm asking you one thing, and you're saying something completely different," Erum said, her eyebrows slightly furrowed as she looked at me. I hesitated before replying, "Erum, you've grown so much. Just last year, you were still a little girl." Her presence, her figure, anyone's gaze could be drawn to her. There was no denying it. Before she could respond, my aunt appeared, sitting beside me. "I keep telling her to start wearing a scarf," she said, glancing at Erum. "She's grown up now." With that, my aunt placed a cup of tea in front of me. I lowered my gaze, focusing on the steaming liquid, taking small sips. The entire day passed in a strange restlessness. That night, I had barely laid down when Erum appeared again. This time, she was standing at my door. "Mom sent this for you," she said, holding a glass of milk. She wasn't wearing a scarf. I glanced at her once, then forgot to look away. For the first time, I felt my faith wavering. She was younger than me, yes, but she was undeniably a woman now, a fully grown, captivating presence. "What's wrong, Ahmad?" she asked, waving the glass slightly. "Take the milk. I have other things to do." I blinked, shaking my head to clear my thoughts. I silently cursed myself, whispering a prayer under my breath before taking the glass from her hands. She left, but she didn't leave my mind. The entire night, I found myself restless. Sleep evaded me as my thoughts remained tangled in something I shouldn't have been thinking about. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. A headache throbbed at my temples. I stepped out of my room, squinting slightly. Erum was in the kitchen. She was cooking. "Where's Aunt?" I asked, rubbing the back of my neck. "She's still asleep," Erum replied without looking at me. "She's not feeling well today, so I'm making breakfast." I frowned. "Are you all right?" She finally turned to face me, her eyes sharp. "If you don't like my cooking, you can eat outside." Her tone was clipped. I stared at her, confused. What had gotten into her? Why was she suddenly upset? I had no idea. I said nothing. Instead, I turned and stepped outside. There was no point in asking her for breakfast. It would only mean getting insulted. Just as I was about to leave, I heard my aunt's voice calling me. I turned back and made my way to her room. Her voice was laced with pain. She was lying in bed, her face slightly pale. "Ahmad, my legs are hurting terribly today," she murmured. I sat beside her, concerned. "Are you all right? What happened?" She sighed, shifting slightly. "I don't know. My legs keep hurting every day, and it just keeps getting worse." "Why don't you see a doctor?" I asked. "I've tried everything," she said with a weak smile, "but nothing helps." I placed a reassuring hand on hers. Don't worry. As long as I'm here, I'll massage your legs every day. You'll feel better. Aunt's face lit up with a smile. That's why I call you my son. You care for me just like one. True to my word, I started massaging her legs every evening. She slowly began to feel better, and seeing her relieved made me happy. However, something else started bothering me. My aunt still saw me as a child. She would ask for a massage every night, not realizing that I was no longer the little boy she used to carry around. I was growing up. One evening, as I massaged her legs, she started talking. Erum has grown up now, she said thoughtfully. I'm thinking of getting her married. I paused for a second. Isn't it too soon? Aunt sighed. Ahmad, when daughters grow up, the world notices before the parents do. I said nothing. The neighbors have started asking, she continued. They keep saying, when will you get your daughter married? What am I supposed to tell them? She exhaled slowly. Her figure makes her look older than she really is. I've told her so many times, take care of yourself now. After marriage, no one gets the time. But does she listen? No. She just laughs and says, these days boys prefer girls like me. A deep sense of shame washed over me at my aunt's words. She was a simple woman, always speaking her mind without hesitation, never considering the impact her words might have. That day she did the same. She voiced her thoughts freely, without realizing the storm she had just stirred within me. I was a young man. My emotions were awake, restless. The Erum I had always seen as a child no longer seemed like one. Was it merely my perception, or had she truly grown into a woman? I didn't know. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. As I massaged my aunt's legs, we continued to talk. That's when Erum appeared, standing in the doorway. Her gaze met mine, and for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between us. Then, as if nothing had happened, she turned and walked away. I finished the massage and retreated to my room. That night was unbearable. Sleep eluded me, and frustration gnawed at my insides. I tossed and turned until exhaustion took over. But even then, my mind wouldn't rest. At some point, I sat up, my breath shallow, my body tense. The silence of the night was deafening. Then suddenly I felt it, an unsettling presence just beyond my door. I shook my head. It had to be my imagination. But then I heard it. A soft knock. So faint it was almost imperceptible. I froze, listening carefully. Another knock, just as gentle, yet deliberate. I hesitated before standing up and walking toward the door. My hands trembled as I turned the knob. The door creaked open slightly, and my heart stopped. Erum. She stood there in the dim glow of the corridor light. I felt the blood drain from my face. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Is everything all right? Is Aunt okay? She didn't respond. Instead, she stepped into my room without permission. I stared at her, my confusion turning to unease. Erum, if there's something you need to say, wait until morning. It's not right for you to be here at this hour. She remained silent, her eyes fixed on me. I noticed her attire, a loose-fitting gown that clung delicately to her frame. A strange feeling stirred in my chest, something unfamiliar and terrifying. My pulse quickened. Erum, go back to your room, I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't appropriate. She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. Massage my shoulders, Ahmad, she murmured, her voice low and deliberate. I flinched, shocked by her words. What? I asked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. She sighed as if I was being difficult. It's just a massage. My body is sore from all the work today. Her tone, her posture, everything about her felt different. I struggled to find the right words. This isn't possible, I managed to say. Erum, you shouldn't be here. If Aunt finds out, it'll create trouble for both of us. Please, go back. She didn't move. Instead, she took another step forward, her eyes locked onto mine. Why are you acting like this? She asked, tilting her head slightly. It's just you and me. No one else has to know. I inhaled sharply, stepping back. Erum, you're not a child anymore. And I'm not a fool. This isn't right. Go before you regret this. But she didn't listen. In a swift motion, she let the gown slip from her shoulders, revealing far more than I ever wanted to see. I gasped, stepping back, horrified. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice laced with panic. She smiled faintly. "What's wrong, Ahmad?" she asked, her tone teasing, almost playful. "You've been staring at me all day. Don't pretend you haven't noticed." My hands clenched into fists. "Put your gown back on," I said, my voice firm. "This is wrong. Your mother is right. You should get married. This isn't how things should be." She took another step forward. "Then marry me," she whispered. "You're right. Mom keeps saying I need to get married. So marry me, Ahmad." I felt the ground beneath me vanish. She reached for my arm, pressing herself against me. I shoved her away, my breath ragged. "Enough!" I snapped, grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her. "Do you even realize what you're saying? What you're doing?" She only smiled. "What's the matter?" she asked, her voice light. "Are you afraid?" My stomach twisted. This wasn't the Erum I knew. This wasn't the girl I had grown up with. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to steady. "Erum, if you have no respect for yourself, at least have some for me. Leave before you make things worse for both of us." Just as I was about to warn her to leave, Erum reached for my shirt, attempting to pull it off. I was too stunned to react, my mind racing to process what was happening. And then, before I could stop her, my aunt walked in. She stood frozen at the door, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Ghulam Ahmad," she whispered, her voice trembling. I never imagined you would betray my trust like this." I felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath me. "Aunt, please," I pleaded, my voice thick with desperation. "It's not what you think." Tears welled up in her eyes. "She's my daughter, Ahmad. She is younger than you. You should have stopped her. You should have been the one to show her the right path." I struggled to find the words. I needed her to understand. "Aunt, you're mistaken," I said urgently. "You only saw the last part. You don't know the whole truth." "I swear on everything, I am innocent." But she wasn't listening. "I saw you," she snapped. "I saw you with my own eyes." I dropped to my knees before her. "No, Aunt, please listen to me. Erum came to me. She wanted me to massage her like I do for you, but I refused. I told her she wasn't a child anymore, that she should respect herself, but she wouldn't listen. She started undressing herself. I turned to look at Erum, hoping she would admit to her actions, but she stood there, her face blank, saying nothing. Aunt looked at me in shock, then turned to Erum. Without hesitation, she raised her hand and slapped her across the face. "Leave!" she shouted. "Get out of here!" Erum stumbled back, her hand pressed against her cheek. Aunt turned back to me, her voice trembling. "I am not accusing you, Ahmad. I know my daughter. I know there is something wrong with her." She walked out, leaving me sitting there speechless. I didn't see Erum for the rest of the day. She didn't come near me, nor did I try to find her. My aunt, too, avoided me. She still prepared my meals, still took care of my needs, but she spoke to me only when necessary. By the evening, I couldn't take it anymore. "Aunt, please," I said, my voice low. "Believe me, I didn't do anything." She sighed heavily. "I don't want to talk about it anymore, Ahmad. Erum has already told me everything." I froze. "What do you mean?" "It's best if you leave tomorrow," she said simply. A deep shame settled in my chest. That night I had no idea that my worst nightmare was about to begin. As I sat in my room lost in my thoughts, my aunt walked in and handed me a glass of milk. "Drink this and sleep," she said softly. Her voice was different. I hesitated but took the glass from her. I drank it quickly, hoping to escape my exhaustion. As soon as I finished, a heavy drowsiness took over me. My head felt strangely heavy, my body weak. The last thing I remembered was falling onto the bed. When I woke up, I knew something was terribly wrong. I turned my head and froze. Erum was beside me, half dressed, lying under the same blanket. My blood turned to ice. No, 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 this wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I bolted upright, my hands shaking as I stared at her. My mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. It had to be a nightmare. I blinked. It wasn't. This was real. Aunt walked in just then. Her face was pale. I feared this, she whispered. But I didn't think it would actually happen. She clutched her chest and let out a wail, her voice filled with agony. Erum stirred and woke up, rubbing her eyes. As soon as she saw her mother standing there, she gasped and ran to her, falling at her feet. Mom, please listen to me. But Aunt wasn't listening. She beat her chest in grief. You have destroyed my honor, she cried. You have ruined my home. Tears burned in my eyes. I couldn't understand what had happened. I remembered nothing. How did this happen? I muttered. I swear I don't remember anything. I don't know how she got here. I don't know what happened. Aunt turned toward me, her expression filled with rage and heartbreak. Don't lie to me, she screamed. She raised her hand and slapped me hard across the face. I felt the sting, but the pain inside me was greater. Aunt, I swear, I don't remember anything, I pleaded. Please believe me. You were like a son to me, she sobbed. And now you've taken everything from me. No, I shouted. I didn't. You don't deserve to walk free, she said, her voice low. You deserve punishment. I felt the walls closing in on me. Panic gripped my chest. I had to leave. I had to escape. I couldn't stay here. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. Through the hall, past the courtyard, through the streets, until I reached the bus station. The moment I arrived home, I collapsed in front of my mother. I told her everything. She sat in stunned silence, holding her head. Think, Ahmed, she whispered. Try to remember something, anything. How did Erum end up in your bed? Tears streamed down my face as I spoke to my mother, my voice trembling with desperation. Mom, I don't remember anything. If I did, wouldn't I have told Aunt myself? But she won't believe me. She will make sure I am punished. She gently placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, my son. Everything will be all right. I am here with you. But Mom, I sobbed. If Dad finds out, he will bury me alive. He won't even care if I'm guilty or not. She took a deep breath and met my eyes with unwavering determination. Your father will never hear a word about this. Trust me. Just stand firm on your truth. And no matter what happens, don't lie. Why would I lie, Mom? I whispered, my voice hollow. Days passed, yet the weight of what had happened remained heavy on my chest. A full week had gone by since I had fled from Aunt's house, but peace still eluded me. My mother kept urging me to forget everything and move on, to return to my life as if nothing had happened. But how could I? Mom, I can't do this, I finally admitted one evening. Why don't you just go and ask Aunt for Erum's hand in marriage? Maybe that's the only way I'll find peace. Her face stiffened with shock. Ahmad, if I ask for Erum's hand, your aunt will take it as a confirmation of your guilt. It will solidify her doubts against you. I know, I admitted, but what other choice do I have? She treated me like her own son. I know Erum must have planned this somehow, but Aunt will never see the truth. But one thing I know for sure, Aunt will not refuse. And so I sent my mother to Aunt's house with a marriage proposal. What happened next was beyond my imagination. Aunt agreed. I should have been surprised, but deep down, I had expected this. Still, my mother's silence on her return unsettled me. Mom, what's wrong? I asked, watching her pale expression. Why have you been so quiet since you came back? She sighed, her lips quivering. I can't believe my own sister could do this to me. I frowned. What do you mean? Ahmad, she whispered, shaking her head. Your aunt wanted to give you Erum's hand in marriage from the beginning, but she wasn't sure if I would accept. So she set you up. She created a trap to ensure that you had no other option but to marry Erum. My stomach twisted into knots. I had suspected something all along, but hearing it confirmed by my own mother felt like a fresh wound being torn open. She wanted to frame you, Ahmad, she continued, so that the blame would be on you, so that you would have no choice but to accept Erum as your wife. The truth was bitter, but at least now my name was cleared. Promise me one thing, Ahmad, my mother said, holding my hands tightly. Promise me you will never take revenge on Erum for this. I took a deep breath. The storm inside me had finally settled. I promise, Mom, I said softly. I will never hold this against her. You don't have to worry. And so I married Erum. Time passed and life moved on. The past never left my mind completely, but I never let it consume me. I never sought revenge against Erum for what she had done. Instead, I taught her a lesson she would remember forever. Never accuse someone falsely, Erum, I told her one evening. An accusation can ruin someone's entire life. She listened, and perhaps in time, she understood. Today we live a peaceful life together, built on trust. But I have never forgotten what happened, and I never will.